Out of all the new FNaF fan games to release this year, I was most looking forward to the return to Bloody Nights. It's essentially a more stylized FNaF 1, but with the older spring animatronics. I am an absolute sucker for style, and from what was shown of Bloody Nights, it had that in spades. So after over 2 years of development, on March 26th, it finally released for the world to play, and well, reception wasn't all that great. Only an hour after releasing, the game had already been critically panned, with reviewers critiquing the game for its steep incline in difficulty, or just how it flat out didn't live up to the hype. So I'm here to answer the question, why you hate The Return to Bloody Nights. The Return to Bloody Nights is the spiritual successor to Bloody Nights at Freddy's by Kozovsky. The Return to Bloody Nights is made by the same developer who wanted to expand further on the elements that made the first game so unique, primarily how well it replicated the ambience of FNaF 1. That's all there is to know about this game. It set out to remake and greatly outdo its source material, and I personally think it did that, but many people in the community didn't. Okay, enough stalling, here's why it isn't all that great. I'd say about 90% of FNaF fan games these days have a set night length. In FNaF 1, it's 9 minutes, in 2, it's 7 minutes, and so on. There are exceptions to this formula, i.e. Tearland, Taiken Sons, Juniors, etc., but a common theme in those games is that the night sections are all objective based, meaning you end at your own pace, so you're essentially always playing the game without much downtime. The Return to Bloody Nights, however, is an exception to both of these typical styles. It instead combines the literal worst aspects of both styles. There is a set night length, however it's randomized each night. On paper, it's not a bad idea if I'm being honest. It means the player would always have to be on their toes and not relying too heavily on 6 AM. But in this game, it just doesn't work. The game has a weird difficulty progression, which trust me, I'll touch on later. But when you take the most random AI and combine it with randomized night lengths, you get into some borderline impossible situations, which especially sucks considering the game was marketed as having no RNG. If there's one thing that instantly turns me off from a game, it would have to be Jank Controls, and thankfully that isn't too much of an issue with Return to Bloody Nights. However, it's still a problem. All of the movements, scrolling around the office, switching cameras, the flashlight, the interactive cutscenes, all feel unresponsive. It may seem as if I'm coming up with things to complain about, but having jank gameplay is a real issue. It's hard to want to play a game as if it feels as if it's barely functional. Personal grievance, I hate inconsistent gameplay. If you're making a game, you should start with your difficulty on the down low for new players to get a good feel of the controls and gameplay setting. Then, over the course of the game, should you ever so slightly raise the difficulty. If you want to make your game more difficult, just do so either at the start so the player knows what they're in for, or increase the difficulty at the end as a final test of sorts. But making one of the hardest nights of your FNaF fan game the third night feels a little weird to me. The first 2 nights are relatively easy, so why all of a sudden increase the difficulty so drastically? If you aren't aware of night 3, 2 new characters get added to the mix. So not only do you have to juggle 2 enemies and the puppet thing in the back, whose AI already increased tenfold, but also the newly added characters. It's no wonder people were getting stuck on night 3 and just had enough. It's time I play devil's advocate here. This entire video I've made an effort to explain everything wrong with The Return to Bloody Nights and why it doesn't work. However, I think I should make it clear that this isn't a bad game. I was talking to another FNaF developer, Phantron, about this exact topic, and he came up with a couple really good points to bring up.
Hello there, my name is Phantron, aka Phantron Games. While Return to Bloody Nights has its flaws, there are some positives I want to bring up that deserve attention. Such as the amount of detail that has gone to the environments in the game, and the Easter eggs and references to other games. To the entrance showing the sun rising when it hits 5 AM, these sorts of design choices are really cool, and help make the game more immersive for the player. And while yes, some of the Easter eggs can be a bit on the nose, I think it's just fun to spot what game is referenced, especially in the prize corner behind the office. There are so many toys and trinkets that you can spot being nods to other cool games. Some of my favorites have to be Cuphead, or Scout from TF2, Baddington's Stitch Buddy, and the phone guy from Day Shift at Freddy's. A lot of these things are just really fun things to look at. More things I find very positive about Bloody Nights is the voice acting. Oh my god, I love the direction towards the voices of these famous characters we all know and love. Those, of course, being the classic duo of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Alongside William and Henry, of course, my favorite voice actor has to be Fredbear 2.0. I find the idea of Fredbear trying to speak to you and learn even how to talk is so cool, and funny sometimes. Fredbear 2.0 is now my favorite FNaF fan game character, thanks to him saying stuff like Ice Lemonade and Ice Cream out of nowhere with no context at all. Henry and William's interactions as well are very good. The idea of William being more shut out and more business rather than actual caring thoughts and conversations is pretty perfect for a man who's about to make child killing sprees normal in the FNAF universe. Overall, great work for the voice actors involved. One last thing I really have to get credit for Bloody Nights is the ambience. The soundtrack they made for this game is really cool. I really love the amount of audio effects being used for the night sections. It just gives the players such eerie vibes and brings them on their feet like every single time. I know for a fact when I was playing the game, I was on the edge of my seat because I didn't know which one was really a sound audio cue and which one was just a creepy factor. Some of my favorite random effects has to be the giggles of the ghosts, to the carnival sounds, and the Help Wanted song playing in the background. Overall, this game does have flaws, but it also has some very good positives. Like every other fan game, I think the Return to Bloody Nights also succeeds at making an overall pleasant experience for a person who is just looking for a good fan game to play on their free time, and hopefully win. However, is it the best Fredbear game ever? No. But is it the worst Fredbear game ever? No. The Return to Bloody Nights is all out a solid fan game that definitely is worth the play. That's all from me. Make sure to follow me on Game Jolt and have an amazing day.
Okay, that's the video. I just simply wanted to take a moment and address the criticisms the game is receiving and what I might do to improve it. Kozovsky is actively working on making the game better to play for everyone, so he already has my respect in that department. I shouldn't have to say this, but do not go and harass Kozovsky or any of the other devs responsible for the Return to Bloody Nights. It's a fine game otherwise, and there definitely is much worse out there. Trust me. There's patches coming along at a quick pace, and they plan to hopefully fix everything I've talked about today. If anything, I think you should play the game. It's currently in a pretty enjoyable state. Okay, that's pretty much it. Go play the game for yourself before making any bold assumptions.